Okay, I'm Francesco Fasani from the Institute of Analisi Economica, from the Barcelona School of Economics, MOVE, and CREAM, which is my former affiliation. I'm new here, right, last year, so I just recently celebrated 1 year in the Institute, which has been great. So thank you for asking me to talk. And so basically, I will continue from more or less from Gino's talk. I think I'll go there. And so the idea is basically there is like, more or less, we as economists, we believe that there are some existence of gains from trade, gains from factor mobility, and one kind of paradox for some economists is why in the last century, basically, developed countries more or less went towards like more opening more and more the borders to trade and capital flows and close to migration inflows. Because this is something which is not really known, but like immigration flows were much more free. If you think about the US, it was probably much easier to get in legally before, like in the early 20th century than now. And if you look at data, basically these are the same data Gino showed. So if you look at like exports, trade is much larger. Like if you just look at export as a percentage of world GDP, it's like, this is like data from Freeman in 2006, referring to early 2000. So it was like 25% of GDP. For investment as a percentage of total investment was between 15 and 20%. And the share of population who is actually migrating was something like 3%, which is now, more or less 3%. And again, the differential in wages are still very huge. Like there is like, wages in richest countries are like 12 times larger than wages in poorest country, where there has been much more convergence in goods price. So the question, one of the questions about migration, why like free international trade and why free capital mobility, more or less, and why restrictive migration policies. And one of the answers, there are many answers. One can be that governments are actually doing what voters want them to do, and maybe voters don't like immigrants. And if you look at data, well, this seems to be the case. If you look at data on, like from the International Social Survey program, which basically surveyed like 45 countries, which are the blue bars. So if you ask the population, are immigrants good for your country economy? You get like, this is the percentage of people who agree or strongly agree with this statement. You just have like an average, like 30% of people who think they are good for the economy. Do immigrants take jobs away from natives? You have 40% who thinks they do, so it's not the majority, but is a substantial percentage. Do immigrants increase crime? 50% thinks they do. And number of immigrants in your country should be reduced, and the majority of people thinks they want to have less immigrants in the country. And if you look at the European Social Survey, the first wave in 2002, then there are also questions about how temporary are perceived the migrants. So the idea is basically, one question was if immigrants are long-term unemployed, they should be removed, so sent back to the origin country, and like 43% of the people thinks they should. And this is kind of important for if you think about Spain now and the number of immigrants which are actually unemployed. And if immigrants commit serious crime, they should be removed, and for 80% of the population, they should go. And also, if they commit any crime, they should go again. Like 50% of the people want them to go. And so is this about immigrants in specific, or is it just like that people don't like trade, don't like international trade, don't like free markets? It doesn't seem to be the case. So if you look at the Pew Global Attitude Report data, we basically ask people about their attitudes towards free market, whatever it means. But it's a general question about, do you think free markets are good for your country, for your economy, or not? And so this is the percentage of positive view. Each dot is a country, and in red you have OECD countries. So last majority of people in most of these countries thinks that free markets are good for the economy. But then if you ask them, do you want more restrictive policy? The percentage of people who are not in favor of more restrictive policy is much lower. So if you look at like Spain, you have more than 80% of the people think that free markets are good, and 20% of the people don't want more restrictive policy, which basically means that 80% of the people want more restrictive policy with respect to migration. And if you look at a country on a question on international trade, is more or less the same. Again, let's look at Spain. 80% of people thinks that international trade is good for their country, and less than 20% of people, which means more than 80% of people wants more restrictive policy with respect to immigration. So clearly it's not that people are against globalization. So it seems that, there is something about migrants they don't specifically like. Japan, they have a very, very restrictive migration policy. They have an aging population, so I think it's pretty clear for them that they should have more migrants. So then economists have tried to explain why people don't like immigrants, and probably, as usual, I mean, we economists, we spend lots of time to get an answer to a question where like common people would answer straight away. So like Max Frisch, which was a writer, a Swiss writer, just his economist view, his non-economist view was simply that, I mean, we wanted workers, we want input in the production function, but what we get is actually people, and people raise a number of issues which we don't really want to deal with. So this is probably the most like common sense answer, which makes sense actually. Then economists focus on, so the main point was, is it labor market competition? So is it the case that people, I mean, at least the perceived labor market competition, which motivates this like adverse attitudes toward migrants? And this is basically the idea: if your country gets unskilled immigrants, can you see whether is it unskilled native workers who hate them, who don't want them the most, or is everyone? And what they tend to find is basically if you are unskilled, your country receives unskilled workers, you are more adverse to them than if you're a skilled native worker, because if you're skilled there is complementarity, if you're unskilled there's a competition. The same applies to skilled migrants. But then labor market competition is not the whole story, because there is also the fiscal impact, which may change completely the story. So you get low-skilled immigrants, you're a low-skilled person, so you face competition in the labor market, so you don't want immigrants. Okay. Then you look at skilled native workers, so you have complementarity with the immigrants because they are low-skilled, but if they are low-skilled, they will use the welfare state more. And given that you're high skilled, so you're a high income person, you contribute more to the welfare state. So for you, the presence of unskilled immigrants implies a higher burden on your taxes, basically. And so you may not like them, even if they have the opposite skill with respect to you. And this is what they tend to find. So they tend to find that if you get unskilled people, skilled people tend to be happier than unskilled people. If you get unskilled migrants, skilled natives tend to be happier than unskilled natives, but wealthier natives tend to be less happy because they contribute more to the welfare state. And then there may be just like a story of, and there is some evidence by Dusman and Preston, where basically, apart from economic reason, there may be some just social issues, some concern about preserving identity. And one way of identifying this effect is basically that if you ask people whether they want migrants, and they say, no, we don't want them, and then if you ask them, like ethnically specific migrants, do you want more blacks, do you want more Asian, do you want more European, then they give different answers. So depending on their ethnicity and depending on the ethnicity of the migrant. So this seems to be that there is something more than economics to explain these attitudes. I mean, because this is, in my view, I mean, culture and identity is by definition perceived, while labor market competition clearly, yeah, is perceived, because you perceive your identity, and you perceive your identity, you think that your identity may be threatened by the presence of immigrants. Then there is also an issue of, I mean, as usual with perception, do people actually know what they're talking about, or just that they just talk like random stuff? And if you ask them, one way of checking is asking them what's the actual percentage of foreign-born individuals in your country, and then you just compare it with the real one. And so like if you look at, these are data from the European Social Survey in 2002. If you look at Spain, for instance, Spain, so the actual fraction of people in 2002 was something like, I think like 5% or 6%. And they thought in average to have almost, I think this is the current percentage. So they were anticipating by 10 years, it seems that like traditional countries, traditional immigration countries seems to know better, more or less. And clearly, like, I would say the Mediterranean countries and Eastern European, but then there is Finland also. So the pattern I could see is Portugal, Spain, Italy, like new immigration country, they tend to exaggerate a lot the presence of immigrants. If you look at any reasonable estimate of illegal migrants, it will never be the case that in Italy, I mean, the percentage was like 5% is not going to be 15. I mean, any reasonable estimate you can see is basically that illegal migrants in Italy have been something like 10, 15, 20% of the stock of legal migrants. Although in Italy we start talking about this million of illegal migrants since the early 80s, and we always had the same figure in the media. Okay, so an issue is maybe there is something which could be done about information of people to change the attitudes, maybe. So what about the current crisis? I think an easy prediction to make is that basically having higher unemployment rates and having, I mean, all this like fiscal austerity, all these budget cuts will exacerbate the concern about labor market competition and the concern about the fact that migrants may pose like may imply an additional burden on the welfare state, and the concern about crime, of course, if you think. And so what will government do? Will they follow the voters on and move in even more restrictive immigration policies? And I think also an interesting question is whether this, like, if they will go for more restrictive immigration policy, will be like substantive restrictive policy where you basically you have stricter legislation and you really enforce it, or just like formal ones. So you just pass some like stricter legislation, you pretend to be really tough, and then you just like you don't really enforce the legislation. And here I think there is lots of interesting stuff too, I mean, for economists, because basically in this area governments are really mixed incentive to enforce immigration policies. So on the one hand, you may try to please the electorate, being tough and pretending to be tough. On the other hand, you may try to want to provide workers to the economy. And so, and there are at least two dimensions which are important to determine the incentive of governments in taking action. One is that restrictive policies are really costly. So this is for the US. The blue line is the enforcement budget, which went up by a factor of 23 times between 1980 and 2009. So it's now currently up to like $15 billion. And this is so they're really costly, and they don't seem to be particularly effective because the red line is the stock of undocumented migrants, the circle are the actual estimates. So the stock now it went up to 14 million, and now has gone down a little bit with the crisis. So you have a massive stock of illegals in spite of an enormous increase in the enforcement budget. So not only you have to enforce on the border, but then once you have this stock, if you want to enforce the policy, you have to deport these people. So how much would it cost? There is a kind of a guess estimate there, done by Goyle and Jagger in 2005, and it would cost, to deport 10 million of undocumented immigrants would cost something like 206 billion, which basically makes like something like $22,000 per deportation. So this would be the cost of deporting all of them. Unless you hire illegal migrants to do it, and this would cost us a tenth of the normal price. And so one issue is that these policies are really restrictive, are really costly, and possibly not effective. And the other issue is that undocumented migrants are not so bad. And one could also think that during a crisis, illegal migration is the best thing to have from the point of view of a government. Why? Because illegal migration is a very efficient way of screening device for low-skill immigration, because how can you, if you're talking about low-skill workers, it's really about motivation and ability and effort, so you cannot really screen on CV, and so you want them to come here, you want to screen to pick up the best motivated one, and then to send back all the other ones. So illegal immigration provides this mechanism very well. And while, for skilled migrants, of course, you can use CV, they can apply, and you can give points to their qualification and everything. But with low-skilled migrants, you cannot really do that. And undocumented migrants are really highly mobile and responsive to labor demand changes. So if you have labor demand shocks, they come. And instead, if they had to come legally, they would have to wait 3 years, 4 years, and this means that probably your positive labor demand shocks has already gone, and possibly you are in a downturn in the economy, you get more migrants. And they are less visible for the electorate, so like the discussion in Italy, you don't really know how many they are, so you can, if I'm the politician, you can say, yeah, I think there are lots of immigrants, but you may have some estimate, but you cannot really pin me down on how many illegal immigrants are there in the country. So I've got like more like degree of, I can play with this more. And then it's much easier to limit their rights. So they are undocumented, so why should I give them the access to welfare? Why should, they have no right to family reunification because they're not legally here. They have no right to, they will never get citizenship. They cannot, they cannot vote because they're undocumented. And so this is, again, maybe like a positive side for the government. And then they are disposable. And this is again a non-economist view by Steinbeck in The Grapes of War. He was talking about the migration of people from Oklahoma to California, and at the time being from Oklahoma in California in the early 30s was like being an illegal immigrant. And so his point, like in this book, they say they don't need much, they wouldn't know what to do with good wages, why look how they live, why look what they eat, and if they get funny, just deport them. And it's interesting because they're talking about just citizens of the United States. And so this maybe give some, so as I said, there are like mixed incentive in enforcing the policy. So what you can do is basically being very tough, building this barrier like they did in the US, and then leaving it like open a door for the labor market demand. And this is what there is some evidence for the US by Hanson and Spilimbergo, and there is some work I've done for Italy where you actually see that the enforcement of the policy of the government seems to react to labor demand, and so to accommodate the needs of the labor markets. But then, of course, I mean, there is apart from you, I'm being provocative, so I'm not. I worked 10 years in an NGO which works with undocumented migrants. So of course, but like my point, just like from the point of view of a government and of the voters in destination countries, there may be a negative side, which is basically the harder you make their lives, you may manage to discourage new inflows, but by making their life harder, they may basically induce more criminal behavior. And this is something there is some evidence on that. Again, some work I've done for the UK, where we basically compare asylum seekers, which the government decided to treat very badly, basically to reduce the inflow. So the UK government got a massive inflow of asylum seekers, so to reduce the inflow, they basically made the condition harsher. And so basically they prevented them from accessing the legal labor market and dispersed them in areas in the UK where you don't really want to live. And we compare them with the Eastern European, mainly the Polish workers who came under free access to labor market, free mobility. And we find that basically asylum seekers tend to increase property crime substantially, but asylum seekers was a fairly small inflow, so the overall effect was small. And there is some work for Italy where basically they show that the lack of legal status may increase the incentive to commit crime. So you have a standard Baker model where basically you compare a legal working option with an illegal one. The lack of legal status may reduce the incentive to work in the legal sector and then induce you to commit more crime. And so then, yeah, if you have this restrictive policy, which were asked by the voters, which have like some negative effects in terms of like the behavior of the migrants, then what voters will do will they call for even more restrictive policies? And this is kind of an open question. And now to leave the floor to, because we're now moving to Spain, just like a graph, which has been actually, the estimates have been kindly provided by Jesus Fernandez, who was here until I actually came. And so, yeah, Spain is I think, Libertad and Nuria will tell more about it, but I think it's a case of a country which basically used illegal immigration to get migrants, and then they use ex post regularization. So they had like 5 amnesties in the last, or 6 in the last few years, and they basically ex post regularize. So this idea of like, you let people come in illegally and then you regularize the best ones, those who manage to stay, who manage to find a job, and this kind of stuff, of screening you do ex post. And these are like, the nice thing about Spain is basically it's one of the few countries, I think the only one I know in Europe, where basically undocumented immigrants can register in the Padrón Municipal. And therefore you can use this information to make some estimates, because you know how many are legally in Spain, you know how many are registered in the Padrón Municipal, with some caveats. Then you can look at the difference between this number and the people registered in the Padrón are much higher than the people actually legally in Spain, and you can get some estimates. And so this seems to be, clearly they went down a lot because here there was a massive amnesty in 2005, and apparently here with the crisis is not clear. But what Jesus was telling me, that this estimate could be as well like in the range of like between 200,000 and 400,000. So maybe it has gone down a lot, but it's difficult to say at the moment. I'm done. Thank you.